Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure. When you first read that line, if you've read it, something felt weird. Not grief for a fictional mother you never met. Something more uncomfortable. The sentence is too calm, too detached, too honest about not caring enough to remember the exact day. And that honesty feels like a violation. Like watching someone break a rule you didn't know existed until you saw it broken. This is how Albert Camus introduces you to a different way of seeing, not through philosophical argument, not through manifestos or treatises, but through a character whose existence makes you question your own. The book is The Stranger, published in 1942. And if it disturbed you when you read it, that disturbance was the point. Camus isn't trying to comfort you. He's trying to wake you up. But before we understand what he's waking us up to, we need to understand who he was. Because Camus didn't write philosophy from a university office or a comfortable study. He wrote it from a body that knew it might die young, from a childhood that taught him poverty doesn't care about fairness, from experiences that showed him how easily human beings destroy each other while claiming to do good. He was born in 1913 in Mondovi, Algeria, to a deaf mother and harsh grandmother. Poor enough that his first philosophical question wasn't about God, but about why some children had shoes. His father died in World War I before Camus turned one. At 17, tuberculosis nearly killed him. Doctors said he probably wouldn't see 30. He played goalkeeper for his local football team until the disease stopped him. Years later, asked what football taught him, he said it taught him everything about morality and duty. On the field, you have a role. You protect the goal. You do your job without asking if the universe approved. Life offered no more justification than that. By the time he published The Stranger at 29, he had watched fascism spread across Europe, joined the French resistance against Nazi occupation, worked as a journalist exposing colonial abuses in Algeria, and survived another tuberculosis flare-up that reminded him the disease was just waiting. He wrote philosophy like someone who knew his time was limited, who couldn't afford to waste words on academic games or comfortable abstraction. Every sentence had to matter because he might not get to write the next one. So when he opens his first novel with a man who can't remember if his mother died yesterday or the day before, he's not being provocative for shock value. He's showing you what he's seen, what he's learned, that the meanings we attach to events, the emotions we're supposed to feel, the responses society demands, all of it is constructed, performance, and occasionally someone forgets to perform or refuses to, and that refusal reveals something we'd rather not acknowledge. Meursault, the narrator of The Stranger, doesn't cry at his mother's funeral. He notices the heat, the brightness of the sun, the physical discomfort of the ceremony. He smokes a cigarette. He drinks coffee with milk. These details scandalize the people around him because a proper son should be too grief-stricken to notice such things, too devastated to think about comfort. But Meursault isn't pretending to feel what he doesn't feel. He's just existing in the moment without adding layers of meaning that don't genuinely arise. Later, he'll kill a man on a beach. The sun is oppressively hot. Events unfold with a kind of inevitability, and he fires 5 shots into an Arab man's body. When asked why, he has no answer that satisfies anyone. He doesn't claim self-defense convincingly. He doesn't express remorse in the expected ways. He's not a psychopath. He's not cruel. He's just unable or unwilling to perform the script that would make sense of his actions in terms society understands. At his trial, the prosecutor builds his case not primarily on the murder, but on Meursault's behavior at the funeral. A man who doesn't cry for his mother is capable of any crime. His emotional flatness proves moral emptiness. The jury agrees. Meursault is sentenced to death, not for what he did, but for failing to perform the grief society demanded. This is where Camus places his finger on the wound. We live inside intricate systems of meaning, elaborate structures of should and ought, complex networks of expected emotional responses. We learn these so thoroughly that we forget they're learned. We perform grief, perform love, perform outrage, perform joy, And we do it so automatically that we convince ourselves the performance is genuine. Most of the time, maybe it is. The line between authentic feeling and social script becomes impossible to locate. You know this performance intimately because you do it every day, except now you do it in public, constantly, for an audience of strangers. When your grandmother dies, you post about it on Instagram, not because you feel grief, but because you feel anxiety about whether your caption sounds grief-stricken enough. You attend a funeral and take a photo because documenting the performance has become more real than the experience. You say, "How are you?" And they say, "Fine." And both of you are lying, and both of you know you're lying, and both of you keep doing it because the script demands it. Meursault's crime in 1942 was stopping this performance. In 2025, you can't stop even if you want to. The performance is automated, algorithmic, infinite. You perform authentic grief, perform authentic joy, perform authentic outrage about injustice. You'll forget about tomorrow, and the performance is so constant that you've forgotten what it feels like not to perform. Meursault would scroll past your Instagram story about your dead mother, not because he's cruel, but because he'd recognize what you're desperately trying to hide from yourself, that you're not actually feeling what you're claiming to feel. You're just doing what the algorithm rewards. But what happens when someone stops performing? What happens when someone simply exists without adding the interpretive layer that makes existence legible to others? Society cannot tolerate it. Meursault's execution is society defending itself against recognizing that it's built on agreement rather than truth, shared fictions rather than discovered facts. He's dangerous not because he killed someone, but because his existence poses a question that threatens everything. This is what Camus calls the absurd, though the novel never uses that term. Not that life is meaningless in some teenage nihilist sense, something more specific and more disturbing. We are creatures who need meaning, who ask why, who want justification for our existence and our suffering. We ask the universe these questions constantly, desperately, and the universe doesn't answer, not because it's hostile, not because it's hiding the answer, but because it's not the kind of thing that can answer. It just is. The absurd emerges in the collision between our need for meaning and the world's silence. It's not a property of the world. The universe isn't absurd in itself, and it's not just inside us either. It's what happens when these two things meet. When a meaning-seeking creature confronts a universe that offers no meaning. When a consciousness capable of asking why exists in a reality that doesn't deal in reasons. Meursault lives inside this collision without the usual buffers. He's stripped of the comfortable narratives that let most of us avoid noticing the silence. And once you see what he sees, once you recognize that the structure is constructed rather than given, you face the question Camus spent his life exploring. If we're all essentially in Meursault's position, whether we admit it or not, if the universe really is silent when we ask it for justification, if our meanings really are something we create rather than discover, then why continue? Why not just end it? That's where we go next. To the only serious philosophical question, the one Camus believed came before all others. Because once you've seen what the stranger shows you, once you've recognized the silence, you have to decide what that recognition demands. There is only one truly serious philosophical problem, Camus writes, and that is suicide. Everything else, whether the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterward. These are game. The question of whether life is worth living is the fundamental question of philosophy, the one that comes before all others, because if the answer is no, then nothing else matters. This isn't romantic. Camus isn't glorifying suicide. He's treating it as a logical problem. If you've seen what Meursault showed you, if the universe doesn't answer when you ask for meaning, then why continue? What's the argument for getting up tomorrow? Most philosophy avoids this by assuming the answer is obvious. Of course, life is worth living. Now let's discuss ethics and epistemology. But Camus won't skip ahead. If we're being honest, we have to justify the decision to keep living. We have to explain why existence without cosmic meaning is preferable to non-existence. He opens the myth of Sisyphus with this challenge. The book is his attempt to work through it without lying, without pretending he's found answers he hasn't, without taking philosophical suicide that leap into faith that makes the question disappear. Camus wants to live in the question, to see if there's a way to affirm life while acknowledging its absurdity fully. But first, we need to understand more precisely what this absurdity is, because it's easy to misunderstand. You might think the absurd means life is random or chaotic, that anything can happen without reason. That's not it. The universe operates according to laws. Cause leads to effect. Patterns repeat. Nothing about the physical world is absurd in itself. A rock doesn't experience absurdity. An electron doesn't ask why it exists. They just are. Humans are different. We step back from experience and ask whether it makes sense. We don't just live, we interpret. We don't just exist, we demand justification. We want to know why we're here, what we should do, whether our actions matter. We're meaning-making creatures in a universe that doesn't deal in meaning. The absurd is born in this collision, not a property of world or consciousness separately, but what happens when they meet. When a being needing ultimate answers confronts reality, offering none. The absurd is the divorce between our questions and the universe's silence. Think about it. You work your life building something. Career, family, legacy. You pour yourself into it. You sacrifice, struggle, dedicate decades. Then you die. Eventually, everyone who remembered you dies. The sun expands and swallows Earth. Every trace disappears. The universe continues, indifferent. This isn't pessimism. This is just what we know to be true. And once you see it clearly, once you recognize that nothing you do has permanent significance from the universe's perspective, you face a decision. 3 options present themselves. The first is physical suicide. Just end it. If nothing ultimately matters, if we're all going to die anyway, and everything we do will be erased, why endure the suffering, the boredom, the repetition? Why push through another day when tomorrow will be the same as today, and both are equally meaningless? This is the logical response if meaninglessness equals worthlessness, if lack of cosmic justification implies life isn't worth living. Camus rejects this, but not because he finds some hidden meaning that makes suicide unnecessary. He rejects it because suicide represents surrender to the absurd, an acceptance that the universe's silence wins. Killing yourself because life lacks ultimate meaning is letting the absence of meaning determine your response. It's giving the universe the power to dictate terms instead of choosing your own response to its silence. The second option is philosophical suicide. You don't kill your body. You kill your capacity to recognize the absurd. You take a leap of faith into religion or ideology that promises ultimate meaning. You adopt beliefs that resolve the tension by denying one side of it. This is Kierkegaard's leap into faith when confronted with paradox. It's any system that starts from recognizing absurdity and then constructs justifications for why actually there's meaning. After all, you just have to believe. Stop asking the questions that created the problem. Camus respects the honesty that leads here. Recognizing the absurd takes courage. The terror is real, but philosophical suicide is still suicide. You're killing the part that saw clearly, choosing comfort over lucidity, faith over sight. But philosophical suicide in 2025 doesn't require church or ideology. It's far more accessible than that. You commit it every time you open your phone to escape the question. Every time you scroll Instagram until your brain goes numb, until you're not thinking anymore, just consuming, just reacting, just letting the algorithm decide what you should feel. That's killing your consciousness without killing your body. You work a job you know is bullshit, making PowerPoints nobody reads, in meetings that could be emails, pushing metrics that measure nothing real. And the absurdity of it screams at you. But instead of confronting that scream, you binge another series. You refresh Twitter. You check your ex's Instagram. You turn on YouTube and let autoplay take you 6 hours deep into content you won't remember tomorrow. The question was there. The recognition was starting, and you drowned it in dopamine. That's philosophical suicide, not dramatic, not a leap into faith. Just the slow suffocation of the part of you that asks why. You're alive, but you've stopped asking whether the life you're living is worth living. The algorithm is asking for you now, and you're grateful for it, because the alternative, the actual questioning, is unbearable, and Camus won't do it. He can't do it, not because he's braver or smarter than those who take the leap, but because the tuberculosis that nearly killed him at 17 taught him something about honesty in the face of death. When you're coughing blood and doctors tell you you're probably dying young, you can't afford comforting lies. You have to see what's actually there. The disease gave him a kind of forced clarity. It stripped away the luxury of pretending he had unlimited time to figure things out later. So he chooses the third option. Live with the absurd. Don't kill yourself physically. Don't kill yourself philosophically. Instead, maintain both sides of the tension. Keep recognizing that the universe offers no ultimate meaning. Keep acknowledging that humans need meaning. Hold both truths simultaneously. Live inside the contradiction without trying to resolve it, without trying to make it go away through either death or delusion. This is living without appeal. You stop appealing to external authorities to justify your existence. You stop asking the universe to validate your choices. You accept that if your life has meaning, you create it. It will be provisional, personal, temporary. It won't have cosmic backing, but it will be yours. This sounds abstract until you recognize you're doing it every day. Every morning you decide whether to continue. Most days, habit carries you forward. But sometimes you feel the weight of the choice. You recognize nothing external compels you to keep going. And if you don't stop, if you choose to continue, that choice comes from you. What Camus offers isn't comfort. It's a way of living that acknowledges the problem fully and chooses to live anyway, not despite the absurd, but in conscious recognition of it. The absurd doesn't become less absurd. The silence doesn't start speaking, but your relationship to these facts changes. Instead of waiting for meaning to be provided, you create it. Instead of asking whether life is worth living, in some ultimate sense, you make it worth living through how you choose to live. This brings us to the figure Camus uses to illustrate what this looks like in practice. Not a philosopher or a saint or a revolutionary. A man from Greek mythology, condemned by the gods to the most futile task imaginable, pushing a boulder up a mountain for eternity, watching it roll back down, then pushing it up again. Sisyphus becomes Camus' hero, not despite the futility, but because of it. Because if you can find a way to live fully and well, while doing something that has no ultimate purpose, no permanent result, no cosmic significance, then you've answered the question of suicide. You've found a way to say yes to life without requiring life to be anything other than what it is. Picture a man pushing a boulder up a mountain. The slope is steep, the stone enormous, his muscles strain. He pushes for hours, maybe days, the summit always just ahead. Finally, he arrives, the top, and the boulder rolls back down, not because he dropped it, just because that's what boulders do. Gravity doesn't care about effort. The stone rolls to the bottom and settles, waiting, and the man walks back down to begin again. This is Sisyphus, Greek mythology's most pointless punishment. Maybe he cheated death twice. Maybe he revealed divine secrets. Whatever he did, the sentence is eternal. Push the boulder up, watch it roll down, push it up again, forever. When Camus opens the myth of Sisyphus, he's interested in what happens when Sisyphus reaches the top, watches his boulder roll down, and begins his descent to start over. That moment is when Sisyphus becomes conscious, and consciousness, in the face of eternal futility, changes everything. Think about your own boulder. Your inbox had 1,000 unread emails yesterday. You spent 3 hours getting it to 0. This morning, you wake up to 127 new ones. The boulder rolled back down. You open Instagram, scroll to the bottom of your feed. The little spinning wheel appears, and then you close the app. 20 minutes later, you open it again and scroll through the exact same content you just saw. You post a story that disappears in 24 hours. Tomorrow, you'll post another one that also disappears. Your boulder is content you create that evaporates. Metrics you chase that reset. Fitness goals that move every time you reach them. Lose 10 pounds, now lose 10 more. Now get abs, now get bigger abs. Now run a marathon, now run it faster. The goalposts roll back down. You're Sisyphus every single time you refresh Twitter to see if anyone liked your tweet. Check your email to see if anyone validated your existence. Open LinkedIn to see if your career is progressing at the rate the algorithm says it should be. You know you'll check again in an hour. You know nothing will have fundamentally changed. You do it anyway. The boulder rolled down while you were sleeping. Time to push it back up. This is what Sisyphus shows us. Not that life is meaningless in some abstract philosophical sense, but that meaninglessness is literally built into the structure of existence. Nothing you accomplish is permanent. Nothing you build is indestructible. The boulder always rolls back down. Always. And you know this. You've always known this. You just don't think about it most of the time, because thinking about it makes getting up in the morning considerably harder. But Sisyphus can't avoid thinking about it. He's condemned to experience the futility consciously, repeatedly, eternally. There's no retirement from his boulder, no promotion, no possibility the stone will stay at the top. The gods made sure of that. And here's where something strange happens in Camus' telling. Here's where he makes the move that either seems brilliant or insane, depending on whether you're ready to hear it. He writes, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy, not content, not resigned, not grimly accepting his fate, while secretly hoping for escape. Happy, genuinely happy, in the middle of eternal futile labor, conscious of its futility, aware that nothing will ever change. Sisyphus is happy. How is this possible? How do you find happiness in a situation specifically designed to be devoid of happiness? How do you experience joy while pushing a boulder you know will roll back down, while walking back to retrieve it, while starting over, knowing you'll just have to start over again?" The answer isn't that Sisyphus finds some hidden meaning in his task. It's not that he convinces himself the gods will eventually reward his persistence. It's not that he discovers the journey is more important than the destination, or any other consoling platitude we tell ourselves. Sisyphus becomes happy precisely because he's given up the need for his task to have meaning beyond itself. Consider what he's lost. Hope in the conventional sense. He'll never finish, never be free. There's no future moment when things will be better. All of that is gone. And with that loss comes something unexpected, liberation. Because hope oriented toward future satisfaction is a burden. You're not here, not present, but always waiting for the moment when life will finally be what you need it to be. You're pushing today, so tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow never arrives. Sisyphus can't live in that kind of hope anymore. The gods took it, and in taking it, they gave him the present moment. All he has is now. This push, this step, this boulder, not as means to some future end, but as the entirety of his existence. This is what Camus calls revolt, not rebellion against the gods or trying to escape. Sisyphus can't escape. Revolt means saying yes to existence, even when existence offers no ultimate justification. It means choosing to push the boulder, not because pushing leads somewhere, but because the act of pushing, freely chosen, defiantly chosen, is itself enough. You might think this sounds like giving up. It's the opposite. Defeat would be pushing while resenting every moment, wishing you were elsewhere, dreaming of escape. Defeat would be letting the gods win by making your punishment actually punish you. What Sisyphus does is refuse that satisfaction. He takes their punishment and transforms it through consciousness and choice into his own project. Watch him at the bottom. The boulder has rolled down once again. He could rage at the gods. He could weep. He could sit down and refuse, though that would only delay the inevitable. Instead, he walks to where the stone's settled and begins again. Not because he has to, because he chooses to, because this is his boulder, his mountain, his life. The parallel isn't subtle. You'll wake up tomorrow and do largely what you did today. You'll face problems you've already solved. You'll work toward goals that, once achieved, will be replaced by new goals. You'll build things that will crumble, and then you'll die, and the universe won't mark the occasion. You can live in resentment, constantly wishing things were different, or you can do what Sisyphus does: recognize the pattern, accept it fully, and choose to engage anyway. Not because you'll change it, but because the engagement itself, consciously chosen, is the only thing that gives your existence weight. This is why Camus insists we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not content in some passive sense. Happy because he has achieved something the gods didn't intend. He has taken the worst punishment they could devise and turned it into an occasion for human dignity. Every time he pushes that boulder, he's saying yes to existence without requiring it to be other than what it is. Every time he walks back down to start again, he's proving that meaning comes from choosing, not from achieving. The question this leaves us with isn't whether your life is absurd. It is. The question is what you do with that recognition. Do you let it crush you? Do you hide from it? Or do you become Sisyphus, pushing your boulder with full awareness of its futility, finding satisfaction not in the outcome, but in the act itself, in the fact that you're still here, still choosing, still saying yes to a life that offers no ultimate reasons for being lived? But there's a problem. If nothing ultimately matters, if we're all just pushing boulders that will roll back down, then what stops me from pushing someone else off the mountain? If there's no cosmic meaning, no ultimate justice, no God watching and judging, then why not just do whatever I want? Why not be cruel if cruelty serves me? Why not be selfish if there's no heaven or hell to reward or punish my choices? This is where most people get stuck. This is where the absurd threatens to become not liberation, but license. And this is where Camus has to show us something crucial about what it means to be human in an absurd world. This is the question that makes people uncomfortable with Camus. If the universe doesn't care, if there's no God watching, if nothing ultimately matters, then what stops you from doing whatever you want? What stops you from cruelty when it's convenient? It's a fair question, and it makes most people retreat from the absurd back into comforting fictions. They think, if I fully accept life has no ultimate meaning, I'll become a monster, or I'll have no grounds to condemn monsters. But the recognition that life lacks cosmic meaning doesn't lead to moral nihilism. It leads to the opposite. It makes human life infinitely more precious. Think about it. If this life is all we have, if there's no afterlife to compensate for suffering, no cosmic justice, no divine plan, then every moment of human suffering is absolute. Not suffering on the way to something better, just suffering, complete and final. And that makes it intolerable. When you believed there was cosmic meaning, you could rationalize suffering. God has a plan. They'll be rewarded in heaven. It's part of some larger purpose. These rationalizations made cruelty easier to accept, easier to inflict, because it wasn't ultimate. It was temporary, contained within a larger framework. Take that framework away. Now suffering is just suffering. When you kill someone, you're not interrupting their journey toward higher purpose. You're ending the only existence they'll ever have, the single chance they got to be conscious, alive, human. And since that's all any of us will ever have, destroying it becomes the ultimate violation. Camus saw this during World War II. He wasn't writing in some peaceful study. He was working for the French resistance, hiding from Nazi patrols, watching friends get arrested and executed. He had every excuse to become hardened, to treat humans as means to political ends, but he refused, not because he had religious faith, not because he believed in cosmic law. He refused because he recognized that in a world without God, human life becomes sacred precisely because it has no external justification. We're all we have, this brief consciousness that emerges and vanishes. This is the only miracle we know exists. Destroying someone else's existence is destroying something irreplaceable. This is what Camus means by revolt. Not just revolt against the absurd, against universal silence, but revolt against anything that treats humans as disposable. Revolt against ideologies that sacrifice individuals for abstract causes. Revolt against systems that crush people in the name of historical necessity or divine will. The person who truly understands the absurd can't become a totalitarian, can't join purges and mass murders, because all of those require believing your cause is so cosmically significant that individual lives can be sacrificed to it. But if you've accepted nothing has cosmic significance, that all meaning is created rather than discovered, then you can't justify the sacrifice. This is why Camus broke with Sartre and the French communists. They were willing to excuse Stalin's atrocities because they believed in the historical dialectic, in a communist future that would justify present suffering. They replaced God with history, using the same logic. These deaths are acceptable because they serve higher purpose. Camus said no. You don't get to kill people for their own future liberation. You don't get to create gulags in the name of justice, because if you've really accepted the absurd, you've lost the right to treat anyone as expendable. You probably think you'd never build a gulag, but you participate in their digital equivalent every week. Cancel culture is Stalinism with likes. You sacrifice individuals for abstract greater goods, justice, progress, the cause, and you feel righteous doing it. Someone said something wrong 10 years ago, and you help destroy their life, their career, their ability to exist in public space. You tell yourself they deserved it, that this serves the movement, that their suffering is acceptable because your cause is pure. That's the same logic. You've replaced God with social justice or traditional values, or whatever tribe you've chosen, and you're using cosmic certainty about your righteousness to justify treating someone as expendable. Camus would ask, who gave you that right? The universe doesn't back your cause. Your ideology isn't cosmically true. You're just another human, absurd and temporary, who decided this particular person needs to be erased. And because you do it through a screen, because the person is pixels, not flesh, because the violence is social, not physical, you convince yourself it's different. It's not different. You're making someone's brief existence harder, destroying their attempt to push their boulder, because you've decided your boulder is more important. And you're doing it from your couch, in your pajamas, while the algorithm rewards you with dopamine for performing virtue. Camus worked in the resistance face-to-face with actual Nazis. You send death threats to strangers from behind an anonymous account. One of these things required courage. The other is just cruelty, made easy by distance. But you can't be purely passive either. Camus wasn't a pacifist. He worked with the resistance. He accepted that sometimes stopping someone from killing requires using force. The question is whether you do it believing in your own righteousness or recognizing the tragedy. This tension Camus never fully resolves. If you recognize the absurd, you can't claim cosmic justification for violence, but you also can't stand by while others inflict suffering. So when fascists are murdering civilians, do you resist even though resistance requires violence? Camus says yes, you resist. You fight when fighting prevents greater harm, but you never feel good about it. You never convince yourself the violence was righteous. You carry the weight of what you've done. Stopping someone from killing doesn't make you innocent. It makes you someone who killed to prevent killing. This is what makes his ethics so uncomfortable. He won't give you clean hands. He won't let you be the hero of a simple story. You live in a world where doing nothing means being complicit, and doing something often means getting blood on your hand. You have to choose, and neither choice is pure. The best you can do is minimize suffering while acknowledging you can't eliminate it. Resist cruelty while recognizing you're capable of cruelty. Fight injustice while knowing you'll never achieve perfect justice. And this is where solidarity becomes crucial. You're not alone in this impossible situation. Every human being faces the same absurdity, the same lack of cosmic meaning, the same need to create value in a silent universe. You're all Sisyphus pushing your different boulders. And while you can't save each other from the fundamental absurdity of existence, you can choose not to make each other's pushing harder than it already is. You can choose to recognize each other's struggles as real and worthy of respect, even though they have no cosmic importance. This is ethics without God, morality without ultimate meaning. Not because you've discovered some philosophical principle that proves killing is wrong, but because you recognize that the person in front of you is doing what you're doing, trying to create meaning, trying to live with dignity, trying to push their boulder while knowing it will roll back down, and destroying their attempt, ending their brief existence, crushing their effort to find meaning, violates something you can't justify once you've accepted that no one can justify anything, absolutely. So what stops you from being cruel? Not fear of punishment, not hope for reward, not obedience to divine command or cosmic law. What stops you is recognizing that the person you might harm is as alone in the absurd as you are, is creating meaning as provisionally as you are, has as much right to their existence as you have to yours, which is to say, no cosmic right at all, just the simple fact of being here, being conscious, being capable of asking why, and deserving not to have that taken away for someone else's purposes. This still leaves the hardest question unanswered. If meaning is something you create, if there's no ultimate foundation for your values, if everything is provisional and constructed, then aren't you radically free? Free to create any meaning you want, free to choose any values, free to become anything at all. And if you're that free, isn't that freedom terrifying? Because with absolute freedom comes absolute responsibility. You can't blame God for how your life turns out. You can't appeal to fate or destiny or natural law. Every choice you make defines who you are, and you have no excuse for making it, except that you chose to. That kind of freedom isn't liberation. It's a burden almost too heavy to carry. You curated your Instagram feed this morning, chose which photos to post, which to delete, decided what version of yourself to perform today. Are you the successful one, the struggling artist, the fitness enthusiast, the intellectual? You picked one and you hit share. That choice is creating who you are, not revealing who you already are. Creating it with every post, every swipe, every response. You're building the person you're becoming. And here's what makes this unbearable. You can't appeal to anything outside yourself to justify those choices. You can't say, this is who I really am, because there is no really are underneath. There's just the choice, and the next choice, and the next. You are the accumulation, nothing more. This is radical freedom. If the universe doesn't provide meaning, if there's no God to give you an essence, then you're not discovering who you are. You're deciding who you are, every moment, every choice, and you can't escape that responsibility by pretending you're following your true self or authentic nature, because those don't exist before you create them through choices. You've felt this weight before, even if you didn't know what to call it. The paralysis when facing a decision that actually matters. Not what to eat for lunch, that's easy. The stakes are low. But who to become in a relationship. Whether to take the safe career or the risky one. How to respond when someone you love is hurting. These moments when you realize that what you do next will define you. And there's no script to follow, no cosmic guidance to rely on. Just you, choosing, creating yourself in real time. And the terror of that is so intense that most of us immediately look for ways to avoid it. We pretend we're not really free. We claim we had no choice. We were shaped by our childhood, or our trauma, or our society, or our genes, or the algorithm. All of those things influence you, obviously. But none of them remove the fact that right now, reading this, you're choosing what to do with those influences. You're choosing whether to blame them, or work with them, or transcend them. That choice is yours, and you know it, and knowing it is almost unbearable. Sartre called this bad faith, the lie you tell yourself about not being free. Camus doesn't use that term, but the concept is everywhere. Bad faith is the waiter who becomes the role so completely he can pretend he's not choosing it. Bad faith is, the algorithm showed me this, as if you're not choosing to open the app, choosing to scroll, choosing to let it shape your consciousness. You do this constantly. You blame your phone as if it forces itself into your hand. You blame your job as if you're not choosing to stay. You blame your past as if it controls you. Every time you say, I had to, when you mean, I chose to, but don't want to admit it. That's bad faith. This isn't about bootstrapping or pretending everyone has equal freedom. Poverty, oppression, trauma, illness, these limit your options in real ways. Camus knew this. Tuberculosis constrained him daily. Growing up poor in Algeria showed him how systems restrict freedom. But even within constraints, even with limited options, you still choose among what you have. You're still free in the ways you can be free. The person working 3 jobs has less freedom than the person with inherited wealth, but they're both free in the existential sense, both choosing how to respond to their situation. The wealthy person might choose generosity or exploitation. The struggling person might choose dignity or bitterness. Neither choice is cosmically right or wrong, but both matter because both create who that person becomes. Stop. Think about a choice you made yesterday. Something real, not trivial. Maybe you were cruel when you could have been kind. Maybe you scrolled Instagram when you could have called someone who needed you. Maybe you stayed silent when you could have spoken up. Now ask yourself, did you have to make that choice? Or did you choose it and then immediately tell yourself you had no choice because admitting you chose it would mean admitting you're responsible for it? That's the weight of absolute freedom. Not that you can do anything you want. You can't. You're constrained by reality and society and your body and 1,000 other things. But within those constraints, within the space where choice is actually possible, you're radically responsible. You can't blame fate. You can't blame God. You can't even really blame the algorithm, though you'll try. Every choice you make is creating you. And if you don't like who you're becoming, that's not the universe's fault. It's yours. Camus saw this in his own life. He was Pied Noir, French Algerian, which meant he fit no category cleanly when Algeria fought for independence. French saw him as too sympathetic to Arabs. Arabs saw him as too French. He could have chosen either side and had an easier life. He chose neither. He chose to say, both sides are killing civilians, and I won't support either version of justice if it requires murder. That choice cost him friendships and reputation. He made it anyway because he decided that was who he needed to become through that choice. Your choices probably feel smaller than that. You're not navigating a colonial war, but the structure is the same. Every time you choose who to be in a difficult moment, you're creating yourself without cosmic permission or guidance. You're radically free. And if that freedom feels more like a burden than a gift, Camus would say, yes, exactly. It is a burden, the heaviest burden there is, and you don't get to put it down. But here's where something shifts. If you're creating yourself through choices, then you're not trapped by who you've been. The person you were yesterday, the mistakes you made, the identity you performed, none of that binds you absolutely. You can choose differently. Not easily, not without consequences, but you can. You're not a fixed thing. You're an ongoing project, and projects can change direction. This is what distinguishes Camus from pure existential dread. Yes, the freedom is terrifying. Yes, the responsibility is crushing, but within that terror, there's also possibility. You're not done. You're not finished. Every moment is a moment where you could choose differently. But, and Camus would insist on this, you can't just become anything at random. Your freedom isn't arbitrary because there's one constraint that remains even after you've accepted that there's no cosmic meaning. Other people, they're free too. They're creating themselves too. They're pushing their boulders too. And your freedom ends where theirs begin. Not because some law says so, but because if you've truly accepted the absurd, if you've truly recognized that human life is precious precisely because it's temporary and unjustified, then you can't treat other people's freedom as less important than yours. This is where Camus' thought moves from individual freedom to collective responsibility, from the absurd hero pushing his boulder alone to the rebel who recognizes he's not actually alone, that everyone else is pushing too, and that maybe, just maybe, there's a way to push together that doesn't require anyone to stop being free. But that requires something most people aren't willing to give. It requires giving up the right to impose your version of meaning on others, giving up certainty, giving up the comfort of knowing you're right. And very few people, very few movements, very few ideologies are willing to pay that price. You've participated in a purge this month. Maybe you didn't think of it that way. You saw someone say something wrong online, something offensive or out of step with your group, and you helped destroy them. You retweeted the call out. You added your voice to the chorus, demanding they be fired, erased. You felt righteous, like you were fighting for justice, for the greater good. You were doing exactly what Camus spent the last part of his life warning against. You were being a revolutionary. And revolutionaries, no matter how pure their intentions, always end up building the same machine, the machine that eats people. There's a difference between a rebel and a revolutionary, and it's the difference between life and death. Camus spent years trying to make people understand this, and it cost him everything: friends, reputation, the comfort of belonging. He ended up alone, criticized by left and right, accused of being naive or not committed enough. But he wouldn't compromise. You don't get to kill people for the future. You don't get to sacrifice individuals for abstract ideals. A rebel says no. No to oppression, no to injustice. But a rebel says no on behalf of human dignity, on behalf of the fact that people shouldn't be disposable. A rebel recognizes shared humanity with even the oppressor, that shared humanity gives the no its force. A revolutionary says no too, but then goes further. Because you oppressed me, because you were wrong, you must be eliminated. The revolutionary replaces one absolute with another, swaps God for history or the cause, and uses that new absolute to justify treating humans as expendable, as obstacles, as acceptable collateral damage on the path to the promised future. You see this everywhere now. Your political movement started with real injustices, but somewhere along the way, the movement became more important than the people. Now you excuse cruelty if it serves the cause. You justify destroying someone's life if they disagreed. You tell yourself they deserve it, that harm now will be worth it when the revolution succeeds. That's revolutionary thinking. That's the logic behind every gulag, every purge, every terror. Camus watched this with communism. He watched intellectuals excuse Stalin's murders because they believed in the historical dialectic, in the march toward a future where all suffering would be justified. Jean-Paul Sartre, his friend, did this, said you couldn't criticize the Soviet Union because it gave ammunition to capitalists, as if truth about mass murder should be hidden to protect ideology. Camus said no. In The Rebel, he argued, you can't murder your way to justice. You can't build freedom on corpses. The moment you start ranking humans, deciding which can be sacrificed for greater good, you've lost. You've become a tyrant, even if you call yourself a liberator. This destroyed his friendship with Sartre. Paris intellectuals turned on him, called him reactionary, traitor, too squeamish to do what needed doing. Stop. Think about the last time you participated in collective punishment. The last time your group decided someone needed to be made an example of. Maybe it was someone at work who said something wrong in a meeting. Maybe it was someone online who held the wrong opinion. Maybe it was a celebrity or politician who needed to be destroyed to send a message. Did you pause to consider their humanity? Did you think about the difference between stopping harmful behavior and annihilating the person doing it? Or did you just know they deserved it because they were on the other side? This is the test Camus gives you. Can you resist oppression without becoming oppressive? Can you fight for justice without sacrificing individuals to your vision of justice? Can you say no to what's wrong without claiming cosmic certainty about what's right? Most people fail this test. Most movements fail it, and they fail it precisely when they're winning, precisely when they have the power to punish their enemies, precisely when they think their cause justifies whatever means necessary. The rebel understands limits. You're fighting for human dignity, so you can't violate it while fighting. You're resisting dehumanization, so you can't dehumanize opponents. The revolutionary thinks this is weakness, but Camus argues, the moment you abandon limits, you've already lost. You've become what you fought. Look at every successful revolution. French Revolution became the terror. Russian became Stalin's purges. Chinese became Mao's cultural revolution. Liberation movements became authoritarian regimes. The pattern repeats. Kill the oppressors and we'll be free. But freedom never comes because you can't build it on killing. And you participate constantly, just at smaller scale. You don't run gulags, but you destroy people who disagree. You don't execute dissidents, but you try to get them fired. You justify it the same way. They deserve it. The cause demands it. We're fighting for something bigger. That's revolutionary logic. That's the thinking that builds death camps, one decision at a time. Camus isn't naive. He knows oppression is real, needs resisting. He worked in the resistance against actual Nazis. But he understood, fighting monsters doesn't make you good. It makes you someone fighting monsters. And if you use monstrous methods, if you adopt their logic of expendable humans, you become a different kind of monster. The rebel fights without claiming righteousness, fights without certainty about ultimate good, fights because this specific person is being crushed and they can help stop it, not because they have a blueprint for perfect society. The rebel knows they might be wrong, knows their cause isn't cosmically justified, and fights anyway, because sometimes you have to act even though you're not absolutely right. But here's the trap. Here's where it gets truly difficult, because saying you can't kill for the future is easy when you're not facing someone who will absolutely kill if you don't stop them. It's easy to say, preserve human dignity, when preserving it doesn't require violence. But what happens when it does? What happens when someone is murdering innocent people and the only way to stop them is force? What happens when resistance requires bloodshed? Do you maintain your principles and watch people die? Or do you compromise your principles and stop the killing? This is the question Camus faced and never fully answered. This is the tension he lived in. This is where the rebel meets the limit of rebellion and has to decide whether to cross over into something darker. And how you answer this question, what you do in that impossible moment, when all your options involve harm, that's what determines whether you're still human or whether you've become the machine. The rats came up to die in the streets, first a few, then hundreds. People complained about the stench, demanded action. Then the rats stopped coming, and the people started getting sick. This is how Camus opens The Plague, his 1947 novel about an Algerian city sealed by epidemic. It's about disease, but also everything else, how communities respond when something incomprehensible invades daily life, how humans maintain decency when the world becomes manifestly indecent. Dr. Bernard Rieux narrates. He's a physician, one of the first to recognize what's happening. Bubonic plague, medieval disease, shouldn't exist anymore, but it does, and authorities delay action to avoid panic. By the time they seal the gates, it's too late. Thousands will die. No one knows when it will end. Rieux does the only thing he can. He treats patients, not because treatment works reliably. Most die anyway, not because he believes he'll defeat the plague. He knows disease follows its own logic. He treats patients because they're suffering. He has training that might ease that suffering. And what else is there to do? This is the rebel in purest form, not fighting because victory is guaranteed, just responding to immediate suffering with immediate action, knowing the action won't solve the fundamental problem. The plague will run its course. People will die. Nothing Rieux does changes this larger pattern. Everything he does matters to the specific person in front of him. He's a saint without God, doesn't believe in divine purpose, doesn't pray. When Father Panelou preaches that plague is God's punishment, Rieux tells him, I've seen too many children die to believe in a God who would arrange that. He's not angry, he's past anger. He simply doesn't find religious explanations useful when facing a child's fever. But refusing religious comfort doesn't make him cynical. He works himself to exhaustion, 18-hour days, constant infection exposure. Watching patients die despite efforts, he keeps going because these specific humans, right now, need help, and he can provide it and that immediate fact is enough. You lived through a version of this recently. COVID-19 wasn't bubonic plague, but the structure was identical. Disease appears, authorities delay. By the time lockdowns start, it's spreading. Cities seal, hospitals overflow, healthcare workers face impossible triage. Exhaustion sets in. Months pass, years pass. The disease keeps mutating, keeps requiring response without offering resolution. And throughout, people made the same choices. Some denied it existed, some exploited it, some broke, and some, like Rio, just kept showing up. Nurses working extra shift, grocery workers stocking shelves, ordinary people doing what needed doing without illusions about being heroes. That's what the plague is actually about. Not disease, but how humans respond to persistent crisis, how communities fracture or cohere. The plague is absurdity made visible, undeniable. The universe's indifference rendered as bacteria, as fever, as bodies piling up. Taru is another character worth attending to. Wealthy, educated, could leave, chooses to stay, organizes volunteer sanitation squads, works alongside Rio despite no medical training. Rio asks him why. Why risk infection? Why care when caring won't stop the plague? Taro's answer cuts to Camus's ethics. He's been a plague carrier most of his life, not literally, metaphorically. His father was a prosecutor, sent people to execution. Tarot realized most people, most systems, spread plague, spread death while believing themselves righteous. He decided to stop being complicit, to resist without becoming executioner. And then Tarot gets sick, contracts the plague he'd been fighting. Rio treats him, stays through the fever, watches him die. All that effort, all that refusal to be a plague carrier, and the plague kills him anyway. The universe didn't notice his virtue. He died the same death as those who did nothing. That's the test. Tarot did everything right and died anyway. What's the point of being good if good people and bad people both end up dead? Camus' answer comes through Rio's continued work. Even after Tarot dies, even after his own wife dies trapped in a sanitarium, Rio keeps treating patients, not because treatment justifies itself, because this patient right now is suffering, and easing that suffering is worth doing, regardless of tomorrow's outcome. There's another character, grand, minor civil servant who writes in evenings, working on a novel, been working for years. Still on the first sentence, can't get it right, keeps revising, perfecting, obsessing over perfection before moving to the second sentence. He's absurd in miniature, pouring infinite effort into something that will likely never finish, certainly won't be read widely, won't change anything. But he keeps writing because the act matters to him, regardless of outcome. During the plague, Gran joins sanitation squads, does bureaucratic work tracking infection rates, still works on his sentence in evenings. The plague doesn't make him abandon his manuscript. The manuscript doesn't make him ignore the plague. He does both. Neither justifies the other. The plague eventually recedes, not because humans defeated it. It just leaves, the way plagues do. Rio writes his chronicle, not to celebrate victory, not to assign blame, to bear witness, to say, this happened, these people lived and died. Their suffering mattered even though it didn't stop the plague, even though the plague will return. That last point is crucial. The novel ends with celebrations in the streets, people rejoicing, and Rio writes, the plague bacillus never dies or disappears. It can remain dormant for decades, waiting, and one day it will wake up again and send its rats to die in the streets of a happy city. The plague always comes back. Literal plagues, metaphorical plague, diseases, injustices, cruelties. They recede and return. Fighting them is fighting something that can't be permanently defeated, which means the fight isn't about winning. It's about refusing to give up while the plague is here. It's about maintaining solidarity. It's about treating this patient, organizing this squad, writing this sentence, not because these actions will end suffering forever, but because they respond to suffering now. COVID will come back in new forms. New viruses will emerge. New crises will overwhelm systems. When that happens, you'll face the same choice. Deny it, exploit it, break or respond without illusions about permanent solutions. Rieu chose response without illusions, kept working without hope of final victory, found meaning not in outcomes, but in the work itself, in solidarity of shared struggle, in remaining human when circumstances push toward becoming something less. The question isn't whether you'll face your plague. You will. The question is who you'll be when it arrives. Will you witness suffering and turn away, exploit it, break, or will you be someone who, like Rieu, tends the sick without believing in cure, who organizes resistance without believing in victory, who maintains decency without cosmic justification? Someone who understands the bacillus never dies, the struggle never ends, and shows up anyway, because showing up is what humans do when they refuse to let absurdity destroy their humanity. January 4th, 1960. A narrow road in southern France. Albert Camus is riding passenger in a Facel Vega sports car, driven by his publisher's nephew. They're returning to Paris. On the back seat sits a leather briefcase containing the unfinished manuscript of his new novel, The First Man, an autobiographical work about growing up poor in Algeria. The car goes into a curve too fast, loses control, crashes into a tree at high speed. Camus dies instantly. He's 46 years old. His unused train ticket is found in his pocket. He'd planned to take the train, but changed his mind last minute. That decision killed him. The manuscript survives, damaged, incomplete, but readable. It will be published decades later, but Camus never finishes it. Never writes the books he was planning. One moment, he's alive, thinking about chapter 3. The next moment, he's gone. No warning. Just sudden, arbitrary, meaningless death. The man who spent his life writing about absurdity died the most absurd death imaginable. Not from tuberculosis that threatened him since 17. Not from Nazi bullets. From a car losing traction on a wet road. From physics and bad timing. From nothing that meant anything. There's something almost perfect about this. In a horrible way. His entire philosophy was about recognizing that death comes when it comes, regardless of whether you finished what you started, that there's no cosmic justice. And then he dies exactly like that, mid-sentence in his life, mid-manuscript, the universe demonstrating precisely what he'd been saying. But here's what matters. The fact that he died absurdly doesn't diminish that he lived meaningfully. He created meaning through his choices, his writing, his actions, his refusals. He chose to resist during occupation when hiding would have been safer. He chose to alienate powerful friends rather than excuse atrocities. None of those choices were cosmically validated. All of them mattered. His death proved his philosophy, but so did his life. You create meaning through how you live, and then you die. And the meaning doesn't evaporate. The two aren't connected. Meaning and meaninglessness coexist. That's the point. Fast forward to now. 65 years after his death, the world he worried about arrived and got worse. He feared totalitarianism would return wearing new masks. It did. He warned technology might make dehumanization easier. It did. But he also believed something most philosophers don't emphasize. That ordinary people, living ordinary lives, making small choices day after day, are capable of extraordinary decency precisely because it's ordinary. You don't need to be Sisyphus consciously defying gods or Rieu organizing sanitation squads. You just need to wake up tomorrow and choose, again, to remain human. Every morning, your alarm goes off and you have that moment, that split second where you feel the weight of another day beginning, another cycle of absurd repetition, another 24 hours that will ultimately signify nothing from the cosmic perspective. And in that moment, you have a choice. Stay in bed, succumb to the pointlessness, or get up. Not because getting up solves anything, not because today will be different, not because you've found some hidden meaning. that makes it all worthwhile. Get up because getting up is what you do. Because despite everything, you choose to engage with existence rather than retreat from it. That choice, repeated daily, is the choice Camus spent his life defending. It seems too small to matter, too mundane to be philosophical, but it's everything. It's the foundation beneath every other choice, every action, every moment of remaining present instead of checking out. The absurd hero in 2025 isn't someone dramatic, isn't someone making grand gestures or revolutionary declaration. The absurd hero is the person scrolling through catastrophe after catastrophe on their phone, feeling the weight of all the suffering they can witness but not prevent, and still choosing to be kind to the cashier at the grocery store, still choosing to help a co-worker who's struggling, still choosing to show up for a friend going through crisis, even though showing up won't fix the crisis, still choosing to create something, write something, build something, knowing it's temporary and small and won't change the world. That's revolt in daily practice, not dramatic resistance, just persistent, quiet refusal to let absurdity win by making you stop caring, stop trying, stop choosing to be decent when decency has no cosmic reward. Camus died before computers, before internet, before surveillance capitalism, before algorithmic sorting of humans, before gamification of existence. He didn't live to see how much more obviously absurd life would become, how much more visible the performance, how much more exhausting the repetition. But somehow he saw it coming, saw that humans would need, more than ever, a philosophy that doesn't promise solutions, that doesn't offer comfort, a philosophy that says, yes, it's absurd, yes, it's repetitive, yes, the boulder rolls back down, and yes, you push it back up, not because pushing is smart. You push because you're the kind of person who pushes, because creating meaning through meaningless action is better than accepting meaninglessness passively. His work endures not because he found answers. He didn't. Not because he solved the problem of absurdity. He didn't. The absurd can't be solved. It can only be lived with. His work endures because he showed what it looks like to live with it honestly, to acknowledge the full weight of meaninglessness, and then choose meaning anyway, to see that life offers no ultimate justification, and then justify your life through how you live it. You're already doing this, probably without realizing. Every time you continue, despite exhaustion. Every time you care, despite knowing it won't last. Every time you choose connection, despite knowing everyone dies. Every time you make art, knowing future generations might forget it. Every time you get back up after being knocked down by circumstances that didn't even notice you existed. That's not optimism. Optimism would be believing it gets easier. This is something harder. This is staring at the fact that it never gets easier. The boulder always rolls back and choosing to continue anyway. Not because continuation leads somewhere, because continuation is the point. Camus won't save you. These ideas won't make your life less absurd. Nothing will. The absurd is the condition of being human. But maybe understanding it, naming it, recognizing you're not alone in experiencing it, maybe that helps. Maybe knowing that your daily struggle, your small acts of dignity, connect you to everyone else doing the same thing makes the weight slightly more bearable. Maybe knowing that the absurd hero isn't someone else, someone special. Maybe knowing it's you right now, in your ordinary life with your ordinary struggles. Maybe that's enough, not to make the absurd disappear, just to make it possible to live with, to wake up tomorrow, to begin again. Camus died suddenly, meaninglessly, with his work unfinished, but he lived deliberately, meaningfully, with his choices completed daily. The manuscript in the car survived, damaged but legible. His legacy is like that manuscript, imperfect, incomplete, but readable, offering not conclusions, but companionship, not solutions, but solidarity, not answers, but acknowledgement that the questions matter, that asking them matters, that continuing despite them matters. The boulder is at the bottom of the hill again. It always is. You already know this. The question isn't whether you'll push it. The question is who you'll be while pushing. what you'll choose while choosing, how you'll remain human while humans around you forget how. You already know the answer. You've been answering it every day, imperfectly, incompletely, but really, that's enough. That's always been enough. That will always be enough. The absurd hero is you. Tomorrow morning, getting up again, beginning again, choosing again. We must imagine you happy. January 4th, 1960. A narrow road in southern France. Albert Camus is riding passenger in a Facel Vega sports car driven by his publisher's nephew. They're returning to Paris. On the back seat sits a leather briefcase containing the unfinished manuscript of his new novel, The First Man, an autobiographical work about growing up poor in Algeria. The car goes into a curve too fast, loses control, crashes into a tree at high speed. Camus dies instantly. He's 46 years old. His unused train ticket is found in his pocket. He'd planned to take the train, but changed his mind last minute. That decision killed him. The manuscript survives, damaged, incomplete, but readable. It will be published decades later, but Camus never finishes it. Never writes the books he was planning. One moment, he's alive, thinking about chapter 3. The next moment, he's gone. No warning. Just sudden, arbitrary, meaningless death. The man who spent his life writing about absurdity died the most absurd death imaginable. Not from tuberculosis that threatened him since 17. Not from Nazi bullets. From a car losing traction on a wet road. From physics and bad timing. From nothing that meant anything. There's something almost perfect about this. In a horrible way. His entire philosophy was about recognizing that death comes when it comes, regardless of whether you finished what you started, that there's no cosmic justice. And then he dies exactly like that, mid-sentence in his life, mid-manuscript, the universe demonstrating precisely what he'd been saying. But here's what matters. The fact that he died absurdly doesn't diminish that he lived meaningfully. He created meaning through his choices, his writing, his actions, his refusals. He chose to resist during occupation when hiding would have been safer. He chose to alienate powerful friends rather than excuse atrocities. None of those choices were cosmically validated. All of them mattered. His death proved his philosophy, but so did his life. You create meaning through how you live, and then you die. And the meaning doesn't evaporate. The two aren't connected. Meaning and meaninglessness coexist. That's the point. Fast forward to now. 65 years after his death, the world he worried about arrived and got worse. He feared totalitarianism would return wearing new masks. It did. He warned technology might make dehumanization easier. It did. But he also believed something most philosophers don't emphasize. That ordinary people, living ordinary lives, making small choices day after day, are capable of extraordinary decency precisely because it's ordinary. You don't need to be Sisyphus consciously defying gods or Rio organizing sanitation squads. You just need to wake up tomorrow and choose, again, to remain human. Every morning, your alarm goes off and you have that moment, that split second where you feel the weight of another day beginning, another cycle of absurd repetition, another 24 hours that will ultimately signify nothing from the cosmic perspective. And in that moment, you have a choice. Stay in bed, succumb to the pointlessness, or get up. Not because getting up solves anything, not because today will be different, not because you've found some hidden meaning that makes it all worthwhile. Get up because getting up is what you do. Because despite everything, you choose to engage with existence rather than retreat from it. That choice, repeated daily, is the choice Camus spent his life defending. It seems too small to matter, too mundane to be philosophical, but it's everything. It's the foundation beneath every other choice, every action, every moment of remaining present instead of checking out. The absurd hero in 2025 isn't someone dramatic, isn't someone making grand gestures or revolutionary declaration. The absurd hero is the person scrolling through catastrophe after catastrophe on their phone, feeling the weight of all the suffering they can witness but not prevent, and still choosing to be kind to the cashier at the grocery store, still choosing to help a co-worker who's struggling, still choosing to show up for a friend going through crisis, even though showing up won't fix the crisis, still choosing to create something, write something, build something, knowing it's temporary and small and won't change the world. That's revolt in daily practice, not dramatic resistance, just persistent, quiet refusal to let absurdity win by making you stop caring, stop trying, stop choosing to be decent when decency has no cosmic reward. Camus died before computers, before internet, before surveillance capitalism, before algorithmic sorting of humans, before gamification of existence. He didn't live to see how much more obviously absurd life would become, how much more visible the performance, how much more exhausting the repetition. But somehow he saw it coming, saw that humans would need, more than ever, a philosophy that doesn't promise solutions, that doesn't offer comfort, a philosophy that says, yes, it's absurd, yes, it's repetitive, yes, the boulder rolls back down, and yes, you push it back up, not because pushing is smart. You push because you're the kind of person who pushes, because creating meaning through meaningless action is better than accepting meaninglessness passively. His work endures not because he found answers. He didn't. Not because he solved the problem of absurdity. He didn't. The absurd can't be solved. It can only be lived with. His work endures because he showed what it looks like to live with it honestly, to acknowledge the full weight of meaninglessness, and then choose meaning anyway, to see that life offers no ultimate justification, and then justify your life through how you live it. You're already doing this, probably without realizing. Every time you continue, despite exhaustion. Every time you care, despite knowing it won't last. Every time you choose connection, despite knowing everyone dies. Every time you make art, knowing future generations might forget it. Every time you get back up after being knocked down by circumstances that didn't even notice you existed. That's not optimism. Optimism would be believing it gets easier. This is something harder. This is staring at the fact that it never gets easier. The boulder always rolls back, and choosing to continue anyway. Not because continuation leads somewhere, because continuation is the point. Camus won't save you. These ideas won't make your life less absurd. Nothing will. The absurd is the condition of being human. But maybe understanding it, naming it, recognizing you're not alone in experiencing it, maybe that helps. Maybe knowing that your daily struggle, your small acts of dignity, connect you to everyone else doing the same thing makes the weight slightly more bearable. Maybe knowing that the absurd hero isn't someone else, someone special. Maybe knowing it's you right now, in your ordinary life with your ordinary struggles. Maybe that's enough, not to make the absurd disappear, just to make it possible to live with, to wake up tomorrow, to begin again. Camus died suddenly, meaninglessly, with his work unfinished, but he lived deliberately, meaningfully, with his choices completed daily. The manuscript in the car survived, damaged but legible. His legacy is like that manuscript, imperfect, incomplete, but readable, offering not conclusions, but companionship, not solutions, but solidarity, not answers, but acknowledgement that the questions matter, that asking them matters, that continuing despite them matters. The boulder is at the bottom of the hill again. It always is. You already know this. The question isn't whether you'll push it. The question is who you'll be while pushing, what you'll choose while choosing, how you'll remain human while humans around you forget how. You already know the answer. You've been answering it every day, imperfectly, incompletely, but really, that's enough. That's always been enough. That will always be enough. The absurd hero is you. Tomorrow morning, getting up again, beginning again, choosing again. We must imagine you happy.